Everybody. It's 2 o'clock bang on, so we'll make a start. Welcome to today's meeting of the Environment, Flooding and Climate Change Overview and Scrutiny Committee. As usual, the meeting is being recorded and broadcast live to the public. So if you can't see it live right now, you can watch it afterwards on the County Council's website after the meeting's finished. We've received apologies today from Mr. Mellon. I'd like to welcome Mr. Bradshaw, who is in attendance as a substitute. I've also had apologies for absence from Anne Carruthers, the Director for Environment and Transport, and she sent her 2 able-bodied folks along, Janet and Joe, to fill in. Before we can begin, I'd like to remind everyone to only turn your microphones on when you wish to speak or are invited to speak. Thank you. So with that, we'll go straight to item number 1, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 26th of January 2026. I move that these are signed as taken and read and confirmed. So has anybody got any comments, or we're all happy with that? Jolly good, thank you. Item number 2, question time. We've had a question from Mr. Stairs, which has been published online, circulated to committee members, and members are reminded, as per usual practice, there is to be no discussion on the response provided. Mr. Stairs has joined us online this afternoon and will have the opportunity to ask a supplementary question, which must only be for the purpose of clarifying the responses provided and should not be a new question. So, Mr. Stairs, are you with us?
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the answer and the chance to ask a follow-up question. I just wondered, my interpretation of the answer is that there's been an underspend in this fiscal year on this area of about £120,000, which obviously isn't a huge budget for the council, but I just wondered why that had happened and then why that isn't taken into account for next year's budget if the budget remains essentially the same next year and there was an underspend this year.
Okay, normally I'd ask Anne to answer that, but Joe or Jana, would one of you like to volunteer? Okay, Joe, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to come back to answer that question, the underspend in 25-26 arises from a number of things, so I'll just list them. Lower than forecast differential between the cost of diesel and hydrogenated vegetable oil, or HVO, staffing vacancies for part of the financial year, and there's a small amount of grant-funded income. So that has generated this £120,000 underspend. These underspends are not reflected in next year's budget, as the council expects that the cost differential between diesel and HVO will increase again in the next financial year. The council anticipates that staffing vacancies will be filled in 26-27, and the external grant funding has now ended. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Joe, sorry, thank you. Is that okay with you, Mr. Stairs?
Yes, thank you, Chairman.
Very good, thank you. Okay, does anybody else have any comments or questions regarding that? Okay, well, we'll move on to item number 3 then. Questions asked by members under Standing Order 32, Section 1. We've not received any questions as such. On to item number 4. To advise of any items which the Chairman has decided to take as urgent elsewhere on the agenda. I have no such urgent items received. Item 5, declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda. Are there any other declarations? Okay, thank you. Item number 6 then is declarations of the party whip. Would any members like to declare the party whip? Goodness, getting through them quickly. Item number 7, I have not received any petitions. So we're on to our first major item, item number 8, which is our first substantive item, local flood risk management strategy. I'd like to welcome to the meeting to the Cabinet lead member, Mr. Tilbury, and Assistant Director, Jana Walker, who will provide a presentation as part of this item. So I'll first invite Jana to introduce the presentation.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, as you said, this item provides an update on the work we do on local flood risk management. I think we'll be coming back to you fairly regularly. So this is a report on progress we've made since we've allocated the additional 2 million on work that was already in train. There is more work to come. So you'll see through some of these slides that some of them are a work in progress. But I think our intention is to come back to you fairly regularly with updates on this. We know it's a matter that's really important to our communities. Mr. Tilbury has asked us to pick up, a lot of work from the community concerns reflected in the work that we're doing here. So hopefully this gives you a flavour and an overview. And also the other thing that we can do is go into some of the aspects of it in more detail if that's something that this committee would like to see as we move forward. So I'll just sort of work through the slides. Everyone can see them and hopefully you've seen a copy of them published with the papers. So just to kind of set the scene, I think obviously there's been a lot of sort of high profile incidents over the last couple of years of property flooding across Leicestershire, but taking it all the way back, we are responsible for our flood risk management strategy as the lead local flood authority. So the current work we do is everything in line with that strategy that was published in November 2023, well, approved by Cabinet in 2023 and published in February 24. You'll see the principles and objectives set out. I won't read them out to you, but they are there. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer as we go along. But I've got a few slides, Chair, so I'll try and keep moving through. But those principles basically underpin all the work that we're doing. And previously, we updated the Highways and Transport Overview Scrutiny Committee on this progress. Now we're updating yourselves and we'll continue to do so. So everything we report on is in line with that strategy today. So the first thing that I think a lot of our communities sort of, I guess, struggle with is the vast array of roles and responsibilities that are involved in flood risk management. I think it's one of those areas not particularly instinctive. There's a lot of bodies involved and it can be frustrating to understand that for communities. So we've tried to produce materials. On the slide there is a leaflet that kind of a handy guide to set out who is responsible for what, if you like. But I think clearly one of the aspects of that means that partnership working, speaking to the community regularly is a really important part of this work. So if we're the highway authority, there's flooding issues relating to the highway. There might be issues relating to the main rivers, which would be the EA. So there are other bodies that we need to liaise with, and the leaflet there sets that out. But our work under the flood risk management strategy is about that partnership working as well, not just our responsibilities as the LLFA or the local highway authority. And we have been trying to get this information about who to contact when out to people, and we'll continue to do that as well. Ooh, clicked a bit enthusiastically there, didn't I? Sorry. So we have a flood risk management board that sort of works across that partnership arrangement that we've spoken about with what are called risk management authorities, so other responsible authorities, and ultimately report to you on the progress of that, enabling scrutiny of the work that we're doing. And there's a number of meetings that support the work of the Flood Risk Management Board. Some of those are set up in response to specific things, others are ongoing, and you'll see there that those meetings take place. One of our jobs as the lead local flood authority is to encourage as much engagement at those meetings as we can. I obviously can't ring up other authorities and tell them exactly what to do. It's done by encouragement and requiring as much collaboration as possible. So we try and make those meetings as relevant for all of those local authorities as possible. But we are ultimately relying on their collaboration. I think this committee, certainly Mr. Tilbury and Cabinet as well, will also be aware that we are quite working quite hard on sort of communicating the the realities of trying to manage flood risk at a national level and influencing that policy. So Anne's not here today, but she's worked with colleagues in an organisation called Adept to work across local authorities and feed information in and really kind of get that lobbying role going as well, because we know that it's such a critical issue for lots of people, and also because of that complicated mix of responsibilities. So we've been involved, taken every opportunity we can to kind of work with the National Flood Resilience Task Force. We've set out on the slide some of the issues that were being discussed, and we've also really took the time to properly engage with consultations using the local evidence we have, and feeding that in, so that we can hopefully shape policy in the future. And we will continue to do that both at a local and a national level. But also I think what we need to sort of be mindful in doing that is while we're putting forward some of those ideas, asking for change, some of that can't be done immediately. And so we need to be really honest with our communities about what the current situation is as well as what we would like it to be. So then moving on, we've just a summary there of the number of properties internally flooded. That's the numbers in the brackets at each of these kind of recognised events. And I think we've actually just had, I think it must have been just after we published these papers, which will teach us, won't it, that we did have 38 reports of internal flooding from the weekend of the 27th and 28th of February this year as well. Now, there is a mixture of residential properties and employment properties in there as well. The majority of that is in small numbers spread around the county, which we're working to sort of collate the information and investigate where needed on those. But again, I think the same as the other events, that first and foremost, the thoughts of the team are with those people that are affected by it. It's a really devastating incident to happen to you, and we're working with those communities to understand what's caused the flooding there and what might be able to be done. But it's just a reminder as well that these challenges are ongoing. And also in between those kind of key dates that we recognise, there are other instances of properties being flooded, perhaps not on a county-wide scale, but on a local scale as well, that still get reported to us. So I think, I don't know, because I've got a few slides, Chair. Is it worth me just pausing every so often just to check if there's any questions before I move on to the other bits, or would you like me to breeze through and do it at the end?
I think it might be a good idea. Someone's only got one or two questions as we go. So do you want to pause now?
Yeah, sort of, I guess that's kind of the background to where we are. I'm just about to move on next to what we've been doing with the additional funding. So I'm happy to stop there and answer any questions at this.
Okay. I know Nick has a question to ask, so over to you, Nick.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Mine's actually on page 13, the graphic you've got there, which obviously got the QR codes on it, who's responsible for what. Can we have that sent out to members of the PDF so that we can use that and advertise that on Facebook pages and other pages? Because obviously that pinpoints who's responsible for what, which might take a bit of pressure off some of us on the days like it did a couple of weeks ago when it flooded down the road here, so that we could have that. Would that be possible?
Yeah, of course. So we can send out electronic versions to this committee, no problem. And in fact, we could do it to all members just to share that information again. The other thing we have done, now we do, and especially with our environmental considerations on, have a kind of do it by digital as the default position. But where you are working with communities that would especially benefit from printed copies, if you're going to anything in particular, we do have a set of those for limited use as well. So if it's particularly relevant to the session you go into, give us a shout and we can get you some to take along with you as well. But yeah, absolutely. I think the more people that kind of understand all of that, the complicated mix of responsibilities, the better. And we're really happy to help share that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Ms. Gray has a question.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered, I was thinking about the revised national standards for SUDS, and I just wondered how binding those standards are likely to be, but also what mechanisms, if any, we have as the lead flood authority, where we've got existing SUDS that perhaps haven't been designed in the very, very best way to mitigate flooding, or maybe aren't being maintained in an appropriate way, and perhaps don't even have conditions attached to enforce that kind of effective flood mitigation maintenance. Thank you.
Okay, so this is an area that I'm definitely learning about. So we might, and again, it might be one of those things as the information comes forward that we do a particular item on. But I think in terms of moving forward in the revised standards, I think there'll be a lot more ability to integrate those into areas where you can then manage them more effectively. So for instance, we have a highways design guide. If there's a national standard, we tend to look at that first and integrate that into there. So where things get advanced at that national level, we will take that and integrate it into things, which obviously helps hopefully get a compliant good standard from when we start. In terms of things that are available to us as lead local flood authority on enforcement, I think if we're talking about things that have been done through like development, for instance, so things that are installed, we've obviously got, hopefully there were conditions associated with that. So we've got our enforcement, either our enforcement or the planning authority's enforcement powers to look at in terms of compliance with those drawings. I think it gets a little bit more complicated when you then move away from being built to maintained, because that could be 10 or 15 years down the line. There are at the moment quite a number of complicated maintenance arrangements with new developments that may make it difficult to track that down. But as the LFA, we do work with landowners. If we know who that riparian owner is, we very much work on a kind of education sort of collaboration basis first. And we have limited resources for enforcement, but that is something that we can look at if there is a clear and obvious situation, especially if it's something like that's been found through a Section 19 investigation, something like that. So I think the more, in summary, sorry, it was quite a long-winded answer to your question, but I think the greater clarity you have over what good looks like in that area at a national level that we can integrate into our policies, the better in the future we'll then be able to, for want of a better word, police that. But I think it is fair to say that there's been a real mixed bag over the last few years. There's some really good examples and there are some poor examples. And I think it will take quite a long while to work through those with others. Shall I carry on, Chair?
Yeah, I was going to say if that's all the questions. Oh, we've got one from Mrs. Pendlebury. Miss Pendlebury.
Thank you. Thank you. I noticed over the last flooding event end of February, we had quite a lot of sewage overflow into our rivers. In fact, an extremely large amount of sewage overflow into our rivers. I know that's Severn Trent, but given the impact on biodiversity, etc., 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 is there anything that the local authority can do about that?
I think in terms of our responsibilities, first of all, we'll be looking at why that's occurred and if there's anything that can be done to prevent it in the future. Who owns those assets that have led to that is then probably where the responsibility would lie in the future, but we'll absolutely work together with the other authorities to do that. It may be, for instance, I don't know, that there could be some highway infrastructure that's part of that. That would then be for us to pick up. So it really kind of depends on what's caused that individual incident and who's then responsible. I think if there is something that we could then work on to get together, we would absolutely be interested in that. I just can't think of a specific example at the moment that we would have done. But obviously, if those investigations are taking place now, it might be something that we look at. And also the general quality of our water is obviously a concern as well. So we are really keen to work with others to understand that. If there is anything specific, I could circulate an update to this committee afterwards. I'm just not quite sure off the top of my head if there is.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joanna. Okay, well, if that's okay with everyone, we'll continue now. Joanna can carry on. I believe we've got additional funding and resources.
We have. And I think we as a team are really grateful for the additional resource that's been put into this area. Certainly from a resources point of view, we've needed to either retain skilled, experienced people and consultant advice where necessary, and also expand that as we've had a number of Section 19s, as a number of schemes that we want to design. That sort of thing comes through. So we are really, really grateful for that. I think the way in which this slide summarises the kind of one-off allocations we have, I think it's clear to sort of see the demand for resource input in that area. And again, I think we could, there's a whole list of things you could keep on putting money into. So it is a big area. So we've sort of set out there was a previous decision in 24-25 to allocate some additional resource, and then the more recent 2 million that has gone from a reserve into flood mitigation initiatives across both Joe, mine and Pat, who's the Assistant Director of Highways and Transport area as well, to make some progress. So we've also got, so we've summarised that on the slide for you. I won't go into the exact detail, but we're going to talk about what we're doing with the additional 2 million in future slides. And we've also got a budget for flood alleviation schemes separate from any kind of additional slippage of £1.17 million going into 26-27. I think one of the lessons we're learning is that it's the workload in the teams remains high in this area. So you'll be working on a project or progressing something, perhaps another incident happens, we put that down and we make sure that we've got all the latest information, and it kind of makes it a bit stop-start. So what we're trying to do, working with Mr. Tilbury, is prioritise the work, put the resource in so that we can continue all the work streams. So we've got a planning work stream, we've got a Section 19 work stream, we've got the engagement community work, we're working with riparian owners, and we've got the schemes, so that we're resourced so that all of those can progress, because sometimes making sure that we can deliver the scheme means that we don't have to have another Section 19 investigation because the scheme's been implemented and things are improved. So you want to keep that work up and running, but in practice, that is quite challenging with the resources we've got. So we are learning how best to do that and working on those prioritisation. I have to say that the teams are working really hard to do that as we go through. So like we say then, we've part of the 2 million that was recently reallocated, 0.3 million of that is to been put towards adaptation of the council services and assets so that we are better prepared for severe weather. And we've put in there around, we want to kind of update the climate risk register, and rather than have the register, but actually put in works to mitigate those impacts that we're seeing. So we're kind of ahead of the game. And also I think it's important, really, just from a principle point of view, that the authority is kind of practicing itself, what it's telling other people to do, to think about resilience and mitigate impacts where possible. So Joe and I's teams are working on that, and Joe's team will be taking the lead, but working with high risk services. So we've identified those as highways. Obviously, there's a huge amount of highways assets that the county is responsible for, and also property, and work with them to kind of identify what we can do to mitigate impacts, what we can do to protect our assets, which obviously has a financial benefit for the authority as well, saving on reactive spend. And we've had successful recruitment in that area, and the officers recently started in post as Senior Climate Adaptation Officer, which is positive. And then on this slide, the team have just provided a bit more detail as to how we see that work being undertaken. So essentially, really get to know what we've got on the asset register, what risks are associated with that, what the opportunities to mitigate those risks are, and also to get real engagement from the services involved. Those services are busy day to day. They're thinking about what they've got to do tomorrow. Our job is to kind of get them thinking a little bit longer term to kind of save time, money, and risk down the line. And then that will continue in more detail into year 2 and 3, where we'll start to implement those action plans. It may be that some of those mitigations that we identified, there perhaps isn't the funding for. We need to come back and make decisions about that. You'll be part of that, I imagine, reporting and deciding where and how we do that. The idea ultimately is we're better prepared and more resilient to those type of weather events that we've been seeing across the county. Okay, and so the next slide, Chair, this will be close to a lot of members' hearts. I know that there's a lot of interest in the Section 19 work that we're doing. I think I really want to take the opportunity to emphasise, though, that we don't wait until absolute completion of a Section 19 report before we take any action. If we can do that, before we speak to other authorities and see if there's anything we can do in the short term. But I do appreciate the sort of conclusion of that work, having it set out, is really important to communities. And I think, again, this, hands up has been another area for us where we've learnt lessons about you investigate the report, you draft recommendations, we look at potentially engineering solutions. They've then got to be checked and challenged. That's with other risk management authorities as well. So you might think you've got a complete draft, but actually the iterations on that, making sure that the other risk management authorities buy into that, takes a bit of time. So you'll have noticed that we've pushed our publication date back on our Storm Henk to March 26 to allow for those discussions to happen. I get, particularly from your points of view, that can be frustrating, but I think it is really important that we've done a thorough job of the report, that we understand what the other authorities that we work with have to say, that they buy into the recommendations, so the community can rely on those going forward. So I think, again, as we move into other investigations, we'll take that learning with us and see if there's anything we can do to speed that process up. But I do think the kind of making sure that the points of view that the community have raised, or the evidence we have, has been taken on board, and that the solutions we're putting forward, if there are any that can be delivered by ourselves or others, have been thoroughly checked. So we've got the summary there, and I guess probably also frustratingly for communities, whilst we have the power to complete the report, publish it and identify suggested ways forward, we don't actually have the power to make anybody outside of our authority take any action on the basis of those reports. And I think the other thing, just in case your communities are worried, we do have a threshold even for formal investigations, but we do investigate all internal flooding. It will just be on a more informal basis, which, in some cases has the advantage of moving forward a little bit more quickly as well. I'll just do a couple more slides and then break again for questions at that point. But so just to sort of backing up everything that we've said, really, we've tried to be out and about more with communities. I know Mr. Tilbury's visited a number of communities affected by flooding since it started, and to take on board the feedback we're getting back from there. And I think sometimes this is a difficult one, but I think that the sort of most honest message we can give is for people to be flood ready themselves, to recognise that flooding events are happening, and to consider their own local risk and take action where they can. I know that's not an easy message, but I think it's important for people to be able to consider that action for themselves. And we have been doing, we've got web materials, we've done drop-in sessions, we've been talk a little bit more about the community grant scheme as well as we move forward, just taking those opportunities to still put those messages out there. And like I say, so last year we coordinated 8 public drop-in sessions. We had over 500 visitors to those, which was really good, and also really grateful to be supported at those by our partners at the Environment Agency, Severn Trent, Anglian Water, District Council colleagues as well, and our local highway team were there. We did, education events. Flood Mary was there. It's always really useful to see things laid out in practice. We work with a resilience partnership, and I think people appreciated the opportunity to ask questions, to meet with real people. I think sometimes they feel the county council officers could be almost imaginary people locked up in a building somewhere in Glenfield. So to get out and about and meet people, I think is positive. And we've just got some pictures up there of examples, and the Great Glen drop-in session that took place last year. The other sort of work we've been doing with the community as well is on the back of the National Flood Recovery Frameworks that were enacted for Storm Babette and Henk. You probably remember that they weren't enacted for the 6th of January incident here in Leicestershire, because we seem to sort of have a fairly unique level of impact in Leicestershire on that occasion. But where the national framework is enacted, those who've been affected by property flooding can apply for grants to kind of help with property resilience, and there's up to £5,000 for measures of flood, things like flood doors, barriers, and we've had 157 grants that the team have supported residents with, and we've got there 750,000 has been awarded or approved. I think, and we've put this in our national lobbying, you may have seen it, £5,000 sounds like a lot of money, doesn't it? But it doesn't go very far, and you tend to have to be able to top that up yourself to make the real benefit of it. And I think we've really recognised that So in some cases, what people have opted for is things like having tiles instead of carpets. As an example, we've got there, so that they're sort of the damage done by flooding is less. Others, and I think this has been a positive joint working story of kind of put their grants into a bigger scheme delivered by the Environment Agency, so that if they couldn't make use of the 5,000 themselves, or it wouldn't do what they needed to do, they've put it into the pot along with the EA, who've contributed to a wider scheme as well. And there's some examples there. So going back to the community initiatives then, so of that sort of £2 million that was reallocated, 0.4 of that has been allocated to community measures. And this is partly in recognition of, local people know their area, don't they? They know what matters to them. But I think we were quite honest when we put this in, that we weren't quite sure what sort of things we were going to get, how well it was going to work. And so we'll, as part of coming back to you, feedback on what kind of engagement we've had. So we've got the expressions of interest that are open for grants up to £10,000, and we're going to start moving towards sifting through those, prioritising them from April. But we have had quite a lot of interest from communities in that, and I think that's been positive. We've also provided the alternatives to sandbags. We had a demonstration here actually on the 5th of February. A lot of parish councils attended, some of our flood wardens attended, and we're able to take away a number of products that might help in the event of a flood incident. And we've been using some of the money that we set out we would do as well for drainage investigations. And that was particularly something that to help move forward where there's a bit of a dispute. So there might be a private landowner, there might be a bit of highway, there might be something else. And rather than argue about whose responsibility it is to find out, we can use the money to at least identify the issues and up our resource in that area. So we're on to using that as well. So we're not sort of going to be rigid about that time. If we have loads of really good ideas in year one on the community grant scheme, we will try and get through as much of those as we can. So we've sort of plotted the money, if you like, over 3 years, but we will be flexible to respond to demand on that. And we're also working with other partners in the area who've developed their own community initiatives as well, and making sure that we're not overlapping or duplicating and all making use of the best funding as well. Best use of the funding, sorry. Just further work that goes on to support the communities. There are 140 enrolled flood wardens in Leicestershire. Training sessions are available twice a month, and also we're getting sessions together for those interested in becoming a new flood warden. They happen every month or so. We've just had one on Saturday here in County Hall, and we starting to work in partnership with Montfort University as well about how we can sort of make use of flood wardens and what opportunities there might be there. And there has been a number of flood action groups sort of get together, sort of mobilised, if you like, in areas that are have been affected by flooding as well. And so we've got more groups to work with there. And there are the opportunity for communities to make a risk management plan, community risk management plan, that would include flooding as well. And we can work with those communities that have got those in place as well. And you probably remember that we were asked by Cabinet to look at communities getting involved in local road closures. I think particularly where things like bow waves affect properties or local risks are known. And we are working on that. With the local resilience forum, who currently look after the flood wardens and environment and transport, coming together to try and make that happen. Right, I think that's probably the next best place to stop, and then I've only got one more chunk to get through. Won't take up too much more of your time.
Okay, thank you, Jen. Although you're taking a break, you don't really take a break because you're all the questions as well. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Mr. Smith.
Thank you. And thanks, John. This is actually a really good and interesting report. There's a lot of information in there that I wasn't aware of, a lot of the things. Thankfully, I represent an area that's not flooded very often. So that's a good thing. But I do have lots of friends that are flooded quite frequently, and it's getting worse and worse. There was one recently, only 2 weeks ago in Breedon. I was up in parish council last week speaking to some of my friends that sit on there, and they were telling me a little bit about what the root causes were. And one in particular there is the balancing ponds, and there's gate valves that don't open. They seem to be stuck and things like that. So whose responsibility is it to make sure that these are functioning so that it actually prevents the flooding in the first place? But one of the other things that they had a real issue with, I mean, it always happens at daft o'clock in the morning. Whenever these floods happen, it's always stupid o'clock in the morning. So you've got flood warnings going out, local community people going out there, wading through the floods, trying to get things, and people are still driving through and causing the bow wave effect, which is obviously causing more and more problems in the housing. Now, a few months ago, I think it was in December meeting, we passed that motion that is going to see that hopefully stop, so we can get local people to be able to legally stop roads, because there was still very much a concern at that parish council that they could get in trouble by closing roads effectively. How long do you think that's going to be before that gets implemented? Thank you.
Okay, two tricky questions in one there. So on the breeding aspect, we are really aware of that the pond issue that you mentioned. The team sort of raised that with me before today. It's one where it's a developer-owned pond, similar to the discussion that we just had. So we're doing all we can to encourage collaboration there, and the ongoing maintenance as well will be part of that. So, and I think that there is it's a dialogue there with the developer to try and work on a solution. The second part of the question, in terms of that, we are aiming to implement that scheme for, I mean, I'm sort of loath to use the word sort of for the flood season, because they happen whenever, don't they? But sort of the late autumn into winter for this year. There are, and I know I do sound inevitably red tapey here, there are some sort of legal and insurance issues to work through. So if there are any issues with that timetable, we will be reporting that back to you guys, but that is what we're aiming for at the moment.
Thank you. Nick has a question.
Thank you, Chairman. It's quite a bit back onto Craig. Now, I must thank you, Adam, for the other week. We had floods in Glenfield, road very bad, and the county council out quite quickly and closed the road. DPD didn't take any notice of that. They carried on driving through it. At one point, the tidal wave actually hit my waist. I was walking down this pavement in Wellington's that went through that quick, it hit my waist and nearly knocked me over. Who's responsible then for policing them going through those closed roads? Because they are being very, very dangerous. So who's actually responsible for policing that? Is that something we could take photographs sent to the police, or is it the county council, please?
Right, now you're going to test my highways legislation knowledge, aren't you? So I think the honest answer is it probably depends under what act or duty we've closed the road under. Now, usually when you close a road, access is the exception is access. So delivery drivers and things as well that tend to sort of make, I was going to say that genuinely or legitimately might need access. If we've got a TTRO that's been breached, if you like, that's a moving traffic offence. So at the moment that is regulated by the police. And in fairness to colleagues at the police, during a time of something like that, they haven't probably got the resources to be enforcing that as the priority with everything else going on. So and I think this is where the education point's really important, because it relies on people effectively being a good member of their community, thinking about that wider impact of flooding on other people, perhaps not being aware. I think that's part of the motion that was brought in December, was if you're just driving along, you don't live in that area, you might not realise the impact of driving along that road could have. And so the education part, I think, is just as important as the physical measures as well to do that. But ultimately, I mean, again, I would advise people not to be in flood water, as we've talked about. Some of that might not be clean flood water, and ultimately, if someone is going to drive through that, you don't want to be the one trying to put yourself between them and a moving vehicle. So people's safety first. But yeah, that would be my guess as to the situation. If there's a specific area you wanted me to look at in terms of how it was closed and what the legal position would be, I'm happy to double check on the particulars.
Thank you, Jana. And Ms. Bottomley.
Thank you. So firstly, I just wanted to ask about the Section 19 reports. Obviously, we've now got like flood action groups and also boroughs and district councils that might have flooding scrutinies that will have created their own reports. How are we ensuring that all of that local knowledge is kind of pulled into our reports here and explored effectively? And then the second one was again about the SUDs. Are we looking at how we're now responding to planning applications to maybe ask for tighter conditions or like longer maintenance periods as part of conditions that then the local LPAs can put on new planning applications to try and stop some of these issues happening in the future? Thank you.
Yes, of course. So on the Section 19s, all of those will have been informed by speaking to the community, so site visits, talking to people who have had properties flooded, and if and this is one of the reasons why they've kind of taken a little bit longer, because as you sort of publish or share something, it almost sort of triggers that response back, doesn't it? And you sometimes get additional information or a question that we need to answer. So it may be that somewhere there's a bit of additional information we don't have. I wouldn't say we've absolutely covered every base, but I would say that we are taking into account all of that local knowledge in producing those reports as best we can. And I think, again, the relationships we've established over the last few years with having to do this quite regularly, I think our standing is in better stead of getting that information. And maybe a few years ago, you might have had a group doing something that didn't get to speak to us, or perhaps they wouldn't know the team in the community, so wouldn't think to call them. I think we've got a lot more sort of genuine dialogue going with a lot of the communities. Not that we're always saying exactly what they want to hear, but I would say that the dialogue is there. In response to planning conditions, yeah. So I mentioned, so there's a few different things. We've got the lead local flood authority responding to planning consultations around SUDs and making sure that those maintenance arrangements, we want to hear about them. We are reliant on the planning authority to take that forward into suitable conditions and things at the moment. And then where they interact with the highway or provide relief for the highway, we've updated our design guide to sort of recognise SUDs as a sensible way sometimes of providing that mitigation. And then what we've said is, because there's potentially quite a lot of cost involved in us adopting a load of highway SUDs as part of new development, when really ideally we want that development to fund itself into the, to be sustainable in the future. But we've got the option to look at the design, how critical that is for highway maintenance, and consider whether that should come onto the county council's maintenance schedule or be part of the development going forward. So that's relatively new, and we haven't had a huge number of proposals that come forward in that vein, but I think we are starting to see that come forward into sort of newer proposals as we go forward. So I think, as I said before, it's definitely not an area that is nailed down, really clear cut, but I do think we are getting better, and I think the future sort of structure around that will definitely be better.
Thank you. Dr. Bloxham.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I found this really interesting as well. I guess it sort of follows on from the last question. When we're doing these investigations, and everywhere's different, and there's so many different causes for flooding, I wonder if we can get some sort of holistic report that weights different causes. So, the EA is at fault for this one because the river was bad, or our drains contributed to this one, some housing development contributed to this one, and sort of weigh them up and get some sort of relative measurements. If DMU are throwing PhD students at us, maybe that could be a job for the next one of them. And then the second question is about the flood warden scheme. I did the training last month. I've got to say, my enthusiasm kind of waned during the training about how useful flood wardens actually are at the moment. And I just wonder how many people do the training and then actually go on to be flood wardens, and whether there's a sort of drop off or anything, or whether, and I know we're going to change it and hopefully get more powers for flood wardens, and that might make it better. But if you have any thoughts on that too, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of assisting with the analysis, I think because we have done quite a few big Section 19s recently, subject to what Adam thinks as well, I think what we could probably do is kind of say, looking overall of what we've learned over the last few years, some of the bigger factors are these, and therefore investing in research or actions in those would be helpful. We've tended not to do that because we don't want to kind of pin a sweeping generalisation about causes of flooding, like you say, when actually you get down to one particular local area and it's not relevant. But in terms of kind of areas and partnerships that are perhaps going to be the most important to invest in, or that type of thing, it would do that. So once we've met our deadlines on the next couple, if Adam's happy and you're all, we could look to kind of sort of bring that as one of the reports as a bit of an overview summary of what we've learnt. I'd be really interested to hear your feedback, perhaps outside of this, on exactly why your enthusiasm waned. And I guess it's about the power to do something. You know, you want to, when people volunteer for something, it's normally because they want to make a difference. And if you've perhaps felt that there wasn't enough going on to make a difference, I'd be interested in your feedback too, and see if there's anything we can do to improve it. I think a lot of it is about sort of support, and again, that kind of community messaging. I think flood wardens play an absolutely, vital role in sort of communicating that and knowing the local area, getting information to us. I'd be really worried if we were going to be putting people off doing that. So I probably haven't got an answer, but I would happily have a chat about your feedback on the training and if there's anything we can do there as well.
Thank you, Joanna. And we've got Mr. Cook. Sorry, Mr. Cook. Can't see your nameplate there. Graham, carry on.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I won't want to be in your shoes over the last few months. Hopefully we're coming to a dry spot now. So congratulations for all the hard work, especially Mr. Tilbury, who's been out in the field as well. I raised last year about drains and gullies, and I asked what the system was and made a probably looked upon as a sarcastic comment, but I do recall when I was a kid, the man clearing the drains out, and he'd done every drain in the street. And we had an experience recently where the guys came, 2 guys flew up the road with the lollipops and put the cones out, while 2 guys sat in the truck ready to do the drain. He got his iPad out, and that was the drain he'd picked, or the survey picked. My question is, this survey, when was it done? Is it up to date? Is it an outside company that carries out the survey? Because the drain that he was doing, we've had no concerns with. It was the drain opposite. The chap's response was, we could do the whole village in a day, but this is what the iPad says. I'm just a bit concerned. As I say, I praise you for what you've done, but can we look into this? Is it cost effective to actually send 4 guys out to do 1 drain in 1 village? It just don't seem right. Is there any scope there for looking at that system and saying, are we doing the right thing? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the remainder of the money that was from the 2 million has gone into highways asset maintenance to sort of manage drainage and flood aspects. And I think partly going back to that, we want to be setting the right example with our own assets type approach. My colleague Pat Clark's taken an update recently to Highways and Transport Scrutiny about the work we've been doing, and particularly on gully cleansing. So I think we're talking about work that's been, when you say the survey, so we're doing some investigations, but then we're setting up a regular maintenance routine, and it's both of those aspects that you'd like us to just have a look over and see if we can be more efficient. Is that right?
Yeah, as I say, when I asked the question about why don't we do all the drains, how do you do it? The answer was from over there was we done a survey a while ago, and the survey says that drain wants doing. Well, as we all know, times move on and things change. We've seen that with the flooding this year. So I just wondered if it was scope there, I know it's all down to money, whether we could go and look at what we're doing and check that system to make sure the survey is working, because it seemed ludicrous to me that the guy we're doing the drain that the iPad told him to do, yet there were drains up the road that were blocked. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm probably best off to absolutely double check how that works. I mean, what we do, obviously we do the survey, but obviously when we go then to empty gullies and other things, we take that information as we do it as well and put it back into the system. So I would hope it's being updated on that basis. But what I'll do, if it's all right, is I'll just check exactly how that system works, what we're doing, and then answer your question separately, if that's okay. So if Pat was here, he would know, but I'll do that if that's all right.
Thank you. I will ask again towards the end, but Mr. Tilbury, do you have anything to add at this point?
Thanks, Chair. I mean, no real questions from me. The only thing I'd say is I think everyone would agree we need to work more with the partners, EA and Severn Trent, and I think we as a team need to ask and request from the EA to be more transparent about what works are undertaken and that, because I'm kind of finding out what works are undertaken second, third party at the moment from residents. I mean, we've just done work in upstream of Syston that is great, but I didn't know anything about. And I think that's the main key. And obviously, we had the flooding a week last Friday. Most of it was Main River. Yeah, the EA didn't really release any statements to let us know what works are undertaken or things like we had chase and we haven't heard anything back. So I think from we as an authority, I think we just need to push harder on the EA and Severn Trent to let us know what's happening and what they've got planned in the work, especially the small items like smaller works. The big works we do know, but just so we can get back to residents more quickly. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Any more questions before we continue? Mr. Bradshaw.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just going back to what Mr. Tilbury said there, I do agree with him on that. I've contacted the EA on several occasions, and they either don't get back to you at all,
Not the same thing.
or you get some like form email come out to say that they'll be in touch in a few weeks when X has been done. So yeah, if we could get more idea of what's going on, that'd be great. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, we were just recalling that this, or I think it was this committee or a version of this committee responsibility has previously invited the EA, is that what you were going to say, Akhil, to attend or to provide an update. So if you're happy for me to, we could either sort of investigate them joining us at the next version of this update, or we could write separately to pick that up.
I think everybody's in agreement with that. Sounds like a good idea to me.
Yeah, just Joe to remind me, we would need to sort of agree the scope of what we would want them to cover beforehand. So if you're happy for us to work with Mr. Tilbury to do that, we could do it on that basis.
Yep, if Mr. Tilbury's happy, I'm happy for you to work with him.
Yeah, I think so. I think also if anyone on the committee wants some like advice or give me some questions that to ask the EA that we'd like to cover, so they could come prepared. So what works are in place. And certain areas like Witherley has been suffering massively from flooding for the last few months. It's been flooded pretty much since like end of December and that. But we just want updates. If anyone needs any updates from the certain areas or certain procedures, just let me know and I'll speak to the team to get them to answer them. Thank you.
Great stuff. Yeah, best be prepared beforehand. So, one more from Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Chair. It's great to hear actually they're working together and you're inviting them along there, because my past experience on if you imagine a length of pipe of whose responsibility it is, it seems to be that you always get to a point where, oh, that's nothing to do with us, that's to do with them. So it's great that we're turning a corner there and inviting them to actually share in the problem that we all face and take some responsibility, if that's not speaking out of term. So that's great news, and I'll be happy to be part of that. Thank you.
Just cut in, Chair, just 2
Yeah,
seconds.
please do,
Yeah, I
Mr.
think
Tilbury.
from our point of view, the A and Severn Trent, we never really asked to be in this situation of them having that, we're having that. We just got to work with it. When the Rivers Trust kind of got taken away and then the A came out of it and things, it isn't our fault that we deal with that. We just need to work more closely together because we make the best of the situation we've got. All right, thank you, Chair.
Okay, well, I think we can continue then, Janet.
Yeah, best hello. You won't be having me back, will you? Right. So yeah, what we just wanted again to just update you on, as I think the kind of profile of water courses, what causes flooding, asset management has just really been raised over the last few years in relation to people experiencing flood events. And so again, we've talked about that kind of complex arrangement between public and private organisations, riparian landowners, usually responsible for maintaining the watercourses that goes through their land, and we do a lot of work kind of encouraging people to be familiarise themselves with their responsibilities. We also manage land drainage consent applications, but the Environment Agency, we were just talking about regulate main rivers, but there is an asset map online, and that is available for people to view. And also we are, I think, all, again, more aware of the potential for natural flood management to be used on, particularly on managing watercourses on private land as well. And it does require kind of collaboration with landowners. But again, it's something that we're keen on pursuing. We've then got the projects. Oh, sorry, I managed to remember to change my slide. That we've talked about. Some of you have mentioned a couple of them there. So we have our programme of local projects. We also look to bid into things like the EA funding, national grant aid, and also the local levy that's on a regional basis. What we have found, and this probably won't surprise you to know, I feel like everything I'm saying is every day's a school day here with this issue, but there's a lot of people trying to get the same sort of work done. So we have found that the people, for instance, with the skills to do the proper ground investigations, which is quite a sort of technology-based activity, they've got a backlog of work as well. So we had a programme kind of relies on everything going to plan. When you get a delay, we've had to move some of the programs around, but we are absolutely trying to move those programs along as a priority. So we've got, for instance, the scheme at Stony Stanton that kind of covers off a large project for us, and again making sure that we've got the resources down the supply chain to help us deliver those. And we've also got those partnership projects with the EA that we mentioned that some of the funding went towards, Braunstone, Sarby and Red Mile, as well as Loughborough as well. So there's a lot going on, and we want to maintain the progress on those as much as we can. Just sort of picking up on that, and I think again we've talked about people being sort of familiar with work that we can do with schools that have been flooded. They've got drainage projects that we've been out and done at Kidworth and at Manorfield, but we've also, as well as doing the projects, we've tied in some of the education parts to that, running works with the kids in assemblies and things like that. I mean, hopefully there'll be some people that want to work in flood risk when they leave school, on the basis that they remember somebody coming along and talking to them about it, but also kind of making the most of that education opportunity as well. So moving on then, so local transport grant. Now, just another acronym, isn't it? LTG, from Highways and Transport and Environment and Transport. But local transport grant is money from government we get to use on local priorities. And we've recently been to Highways and Transport Committee with the capital programme works going through, and that sets out some of the money being used there. And there are both Lead Local Flood Authority and highways drainage schemes being focused, that funding being focused on. And so last year we delivered a new culvert in Oakthorpe, and we, under the kind of flood risk guide that we have, and we used 141,000 of that money that had come into Leicestershire to do that. And we've got future projects in this. I keep saying this because we've filled out all the reports and everything now. Next financial year, so 26-27, Kilby and South Western projects there as well. Hanging in there, everybody. We're getting there. So the Lead Local Flood Authority works in partnership to try and understand flood risk, as we've spoken about. And again, there are assessment tools available online, and that is currently being updated. And I think again there was a national kind of update done. We are feeding in our local knowledge to that, because I think again it can concern residents to see those flood update areas. And we're looking at sort of feeding information from study work that we're doing, and also any new events that happen as well. We're also trying to use some of the money we spoke about for highways drainage to better map and understand our assets there as well, so we can make better decisions around those. And obviously the SATS 19 work will feed into that as well. As I think we've sort of touched upon, the other, one of the other things that we do as the Lead Local Flood Authority is provide consultations on major planning applications. We responded to 1,200 plan application consultations. The district councils review non-major applications, and also in some cases the EA might be a consultee on planning applications as well, depending on the impact and the proposals put forward. So ultimately the local planning authorities are responsible for those drainage assets that are in place, or making sure that they're built in accordance with the plans, as we've talked about. And then, as we were saying as well, that we've normally limited our adoption of drainage assets to those that link in with the highway. and also then encourage conditions around those related to residential developments, well, and employment developments as well. We are working with local planning authorities on things like the local plans as well to establish a policy position to have regard to the sort of local risk flood risk issues that have occurred in those areas. So local and national planning policy we've got up there. We've been working as the lead local flood authority to feed into the current live national planning policy framework consultation. That has, I think the deadline is tomorrow for submission for that. So we've been working across all of our areas and balancing that. So we've kind of been putting forward some of the issues that we've seen in reality happening in relation to development through that NPPF process. We'll look forward to seeing what's happening with those. We've also been working, as I think you mentioned, on the planning practice guidance and national standards for SUDS as well. So just you'll be pleased to know I've reached the end of the presentation. We've attached our action plan as an appendix to the report. As I said, we're going to be coming back to you at least on an annual basis, but I think again depends on what else happens and the progress that we can in between, and just picking up the point about working with partners as well. So as I think we've just concluded in the report that we are able to invite those other risk management authorities if we wish to do so, which we've said that we will do as well. So I will leave it there, Chair, unless there's any further questions, and apologies for taking up so much of your time.
Thank you, Janet. No, you did very well. I mean, I've done a lot of teaching. I know what it's like to talk for 1 or 2 hours at a time, so well done. Anybody else got any questions? Mrs. Gray.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, happy for this to be outside of this meeting, but I'd really appreciate an update on the progress of the Woodbrook scheme in Loughborough. And the other point I just wanted to make, the slide that talks about identifying proactive local assessments to then feed into areas that might be deserving of a study. If you live in Charnwood, you pretty much accept that every time there's flooding, the area of Sile B, Barrow is going to be incredibly badly affected. And I just wondered if there was cause for a new assessment of that area to see, if anything more could possibly be done, because, it just grinds to a halt. Residents are just sort of virtually trapped in the villages in cases of extreme flooding. Thank you. And also just quickly, thanks. This was a brilliant report. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's okay. I'll just, like I say, I think probably take those questions away just to get you the proper updates. And if there is anything around sort of providing a bit of guidance on where those community investigations might have the most benefit, I'll pop that in and share it with the whole committee as well.
Thank you. Now we've got Ms. Bottomley.
Thank you. So I know we're statutory consultees for new developments, but on the slide it said for surface water. Who is then responsible for any other potential causes of flooding? So, for example, there's a development in my division, and local residents and the general knowledge are adamant that we've actually hit the water table. But it doesn't seem, no one seems to be able to then push back against that, because the LLFA were happy with the development, but it is underwater 12 months of the year. It has been for a few years. So how do we go about protecting residents from the other potential causes of flooding that aren't just surface water?
That's great. I definitely want to just have a look at the particular instance before I kind of say it definitely applies there. But again, I think it will probably be another risk management authority with the responsibility to look at that. So again, I will come back to you if there's a particular development as well. We can look at that one.
Thank you. Ms. Pendlebury.
Thank you very much. I noticed the assessment of Hinckley and Burbage hasn't been completed. Do we have a timescale for when that is going to complete? And is that going to impact on any advice given on planning applications around Hinckley and Burbage? I'm aware of at least 3 incidents in my own area of flooding. And what are we looking at on that timescale wise?
talking about the section 19 assessment, sorry, or a wider assessment. Apologies.
I didn't press it hard enough. I apologise. If you look at page 10, you are talking the LLFA will coordinate work with relevant risk management authorities to better understand the flood risk in Hinckley and Burbage. And you're going ongoing conversations, but we have no date on that.
Apologies, yes, I'm getting confused as to which one we were referring to. I think because we're dependent on those external conversations, I think we didn't want to promise a date we can't deliver, but I can definitely get an update as our best guess, I guess, for you and circulate that round. And in response to your question, so yes, if there is a conclusion either from a section 19 or a local study or a piece of evidence we have, if it comes to then a local plan consultation or a planning application consultation, we'll review those bits of evidence and where they form relevant part of our responsibility, we will use them to do that.
So does that mean if you haven't got those bits of evidence that your opinion on, say, a planning application is not going to be complete? Difficult question, I know.
Yeah,
Pieces.
Exactly. And the technical answer is it shouldn't do, because the development itself should provide all of the information. The application should contain all the information we need to make a decision. And I think this committee again had asked previously about how many sort of times we refuse and answer queries, and the reality of that is that generally there's so many iterations to a conversation on planning, because the application comes in, we'll ask for more information, get that, go back again, so it takes time to do that. So sorry, to answer your question directly, it shouldn't do, because the application should provide all the information we need. But I think it is fair to say where we have done information on potential solutions that things could contribute to, a scheme that they could add on to, I think it is quicker and more efficient to feed it in from that basis. So there are benefits to that, but in theory, you shouldn't not be able to assess that application in the absence of those evidence.
Press it harder this time. I'm thinking specifically of one scheme such as the A5 bridge, where we're originally told like it's going to be 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, that it can then be done, which I'm assuming was based on information shared and with yourselves. And now we're being told it's 2 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that to repair. And bearing in mind that the reason for that, I believe, is flooding.
If it's okay, Chair, probably just need to have a look at the specific example.
Thank you. Dr. Bloxham.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just hopefully a really short one. I've just gone on the Environment Agency's website to look at the asset map. And when I look at all assets, it includes lots of rivers and things in my area. But when I go on to maintained assets, they all disappear and I just get a little stream feeding into it. So I just wonder what the difference is between maintained assets and the rest of the assets. I mean, does that mean they're not going to do anything if it's not one of their maintained ones?
My guess would be the same as ours. They mean maintained by them, not that nobody maintains it, but I will absolutely double check that. And
so it's more likely to be like the riparian owners, and they won't do anything themselves.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's very similar to Mr. Block's fact was when you send out the PDF, that thing we're talking about, can you just put a link on there for all members for that asset so they can find it? Because not everyone's tech savvy. So just got a link on there so they can find it dead easy, please. Thank you.
Okay.
Will do, Chair.
And finally, Dr. Hill.
Thank you, Chair. That link could be useful because it's a bit hard to find, isn't it? It's quite interesting when you do find it. You actually made a point, Jana, that reminded me. We did ask about how many planning applications have been refused, and I don't believe we ever got the answer, Chair. You may like to correct me.
Do you have an answer to that, Jana?
I do have an answer, Chair, and apologies if we've not shared it. So if it's okay, I don't know if Joe wants to carry on, and I can perhaps just give that information to Akil, or I can do it at the end of the meeting, just while I dig through the information. Is that all right?
Yeah, that seems fine. If we're all done with questions, anything to add, Mr. Tilbury?
Not at this point, thanks, Chair. Cheers.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, thank you for that, Jana. That was quite substantial. I recommend the report is an update for us to note, and the committee's comments will be recorded in the minutes. That brings us on to number 9, item number 9 on the agenda. And this is the biodiversity report. And I'd like to invite Joe Gill, Assistant Director, to introduce the report. Over to yourself, Joe.
Thank you, Chair. I feel like this is a tough act to follow, the interest in flooding being such, and I might bring a PowerPoint presentation this time. I'm also just going to introduce Vicky Comey and James O'Brien because I cannot take credit for the substantial appended document. Certainly James, with colleagues right across the authority, have pulled the appended document together, but they are here to support if anybody has any questions after I've just given a bit of an overview. Biodiversity report. So this report seeks the committee's views on the draft biodiversity report before we publish it on our website, which is a requirement under the Environment Act, and it links to this strengthened biodiversity duty that's now placed on all public authorities. The policy framework section of the report, it sets out the steps that the council has taken to integrate this duty into its key strategies and plans. The key one obviously being the council's environment strategy, but more recently includes the biodiversity duty plan itself and the local nature recovery strategy, and colleagues on this committee have considered those, and both of those have been produced in the last 12 to 18 months. The background section sets out that strengthened duty placed on the council. So now we don't only have to protect, we actually have to enhance biodiversity going forward in support of relevant national targets and goals. And they form part of the government's, it's called the Environment Improvement Plan, and it was only published in December of last year. And whilst the sort of goals are listed in full from point 11 in the report, those goals cover a whole range of themes from habitat restoration, clean air and water, waste reduction and access to nature. And that's just naming some of them. So some of them quite topical, linked to Jana's presentation as well. From point 13, the report does then set out what the council has already done and still needs to do to meet this new duty. And it includes things like we've done a council-wide policy review, incorporating requirements into the councils. We have a document called the Action for Nature document, and it has an action plan. We've actually had that since about 2021, but it's a really useful vehicle for us to then incorporate all these new requirements placed on us or substantially include them. And reviewing our environmental legislation register. So looking at what sort of compliance needs to look like right across a range of environmental legislation. That's all culminated in the first biodiversity duty plan that was approved by Cabinet in December 2024, and then brings us to today with the biodiversity report, which, as I said, is the substantive appendix to the report that I'm just highlighting, and will be subject to your comments today, and then we'll look to publish it. And we will need to reconsider it every 5 years. So actually the next time we'll need to bring back the actual report itself, the next publication will be March 2031. So if I just quickly touch on what's in it, in that appended report, there's obviously some of the legal stuff, those legally mandated elements that include around the strategies that we have and the duties that the council has to comply with. And I'll give an example. There's a substantive element that links into planning policy and how this duty interacts with that. It highlights links to the local nature recovery strategy, as I've mentioned, but equally the Leicester and Leicestershire strategic growth plan, how they're going to sort of push and pull with one another. So it's a very broad banner, but what does green growth look like relative to growth? And that is not an easy challenge to overcome. There are some case studies to show some practical examples of how the biodiversity duty is being met. And of course, it sets out some of the key challenges going forward. So I mentioned that push and pull between, for example, how do you bring forward biodiversity, but how do you also bring forward housing growth? Very pertinent to some of the things we've talked about with SUDS, etc. And how do we get that right as a collective of partners? And if I just finish on resource implications, we do cover them in the report. And I think I've mentioned that officers have sought to sort of implement a really lean structure of reporting. So we're piggybacking on existing strategies and plans. I mentioned the Action for Nature document, but we're also trying, in terms of those big data gathering requirements that will be placed on us, use pre-existing vehicles. So this committee every January gets that really substantial annual environmental performance report, really useful data set. We'll lean on that where we can to reduce any of that sort of burden. But overall, we anticipate there'll be a small resource requirement. We do touch on it in the report, and the council will have to absorb that in the absence of any specific government funding. Obviously, outside of that, any wider big delivery costs are not specific to the production of the report itself, and they'd be subject to their own business cases and any other wider funding, be that government-led or council or partners. And with that, Chair, I'll pause, but very happy for us to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Any questions from anybody or comments? Craig.
Thank you very much, Chair. This may or may not be within the scope, but it's just something that's come into my head now. So there's obviously a lot of work gone into this report, and it's taken several months to come up with. Does it just get cast aside if government come along and decide that they want to do something like I don't know, a Freeport, for example? Thank you.
I feel like I'm making a political answer to a question, which is a very dangerous territory for an officer. So certainly if Councillor Tilbury wants to chip in, I think my understanding is that there is such a substantial bow wave of environmental legislation that's been brought forward by previous and this government. It's intrinsic sort of within it that we will have to look, and it's not just ourselves as public authorities, though we have some really specific requirements placed on us, but wider partners. I think the challenge will absolutely be in engaging with some substantial partnerships, the Freeport, big developments like Lutterworth East, there's some really substantial growth elements. How will we as a partner in those spaces make sure that we are meeting our biodiversity duty or the actions within it? And that is not going to be solely placed on sort of environment and transport as a department. It's going to be much broader than that.
Thank you, Joe. Adam, anything to add?
Well, just on that bit, yeah, I mean, it's, as you know, Councillor Smith, we've got a lot of development out in Northwest, massive warehouses. So we've got to try and push this through, increase biodiversity, whilst most of our a lot of our greenlands are being concreted over. So it's going to be very difficult, isn't it? I think we need to make sure these developments are as sustainable as possible, really. And I think we need to look at that. But essentially, it's going to be very difficult to pull through when the whole county is getting built over.
Thanks, Adam. Dr. Hill.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'll echo what the last two speakers have said. I think it's, I look at this talking about cycling and walking. I'm quite a militant walker when I'm not in my car. I walk a lot, and we'll build a 1700 housing estate. I was going to swear. Sustainable urban extension, 1700 home housing estate. But you get within 400 metres of the edge of it, and the pavement's underwater when it rains because the developers only go so far, and we can't do the next bit. So it discourages people from walking, because why are you going to walk when the pavement's that wide and underwater? And I think this is the problem with it. We desperately want to do the right thing, but the framework in which we find ourselves doesn't allow it. And I imagine it's very frustrating, but I really think we have to think about these things more. And I'm sorry to say, but Highways is obsessed by car drivers, and everybody else, in my opinion, becomes second place, which is fine if you live in a village, but if you live in any sort of decent sized town, we need to encourage people to get out of the cars and walk more, not just Sunday morning to the pub, but just full stop. And people do, bless them. This particular bit of pavement I'm thinking of, people manfully stagger down there and carry on regardless. But it shouldn't be like that. It should be the first option rather than the last option, that people walk or they have no other choice. So I think it's a very laudable plan. I'm amazed we don't have any species action plans. 1,000 years ago, when I had a PhD, we were knee deep in newt action plans, crested newts that is. They all seem to have disappeared in the intervening period. And it just surprises me a little bit that we haven't got some species-specific ones in the county, but that's just by the by. Thank you, Chair.
Any comment there, Joe?
I was actually going to invite James whether he wants to mention it, but obviously it does link. I've probably done a huge disservice to the amount of work that went into the local nature recovery strategy. And if I have, I apologise, because that was a huge juggernaut in its own right. But there are in that vehicle, which sort of spatially covers broader than the county, which I think is advantageous when we start to get to sort of, as you said, highways networks, and they don't just end at the boundaries of the county council. So it's the city, the county, Rutland, it's a bigger spatial area, but they have done that significant mapping of species, lichen, mosses, of which we have some really rare elements within the county. So I think that it's picked up there, and this report, whilst the report itself is a point in time assessment of where we are and actually where will we be in the next 5 years, the challenge on all partners will be positive progression between now and the next 5-year reporting piece. But there are some things within the LRS. I don't know if James, if you wanted to add anything.
Yes, thanks, Chair. So the biodiversity duty works hand in glove with the local nature recovery strategy. And as Joe mentioned, part of that is we've identified the priority species for the area, and we've also got the indicator species. And we had a very successful county recorder event here last weekend as well. Over 110, 112 people attended. There's a lot of people keen to better measure the species in the area as well. And we're looking ways to increase the number and age of the people who count the species and so on. Briefly going back to the previous question, the biodiversity duty is on all public bodies, not just on local authorities. So it picks up Councillor Smith's question around free ports, whatever else. So the planning authorities, EA, other public bodies will have to demonstrate how they're meeting the biodiversity duty, as well as taking account of the local nature recovery strategy as well. So this is all new legislation, new law. Case law will dictate what is and isn't, the level. The right frameworks is there, but we'll wait and see what it looks like in reality.
Thank you, James. Is that one done with now? We're all happy with that. We've got Ms. Bottomley next.
Thank you. And compared to some of the scale of the projects that have spoken about here, this one does feel quite small. But I just wanted to ask about the cultivation license fee and it being reintroduced. And thinking about how, lots of little things can add up and be really beneficial. I was just a little bit concerned at the cost of the fee for parish councils who want to potentially just put some lovely, wildflowers at the edges of roads and things. Some of my parish councils are tiny, and £280 to even apply for a license to plant some more flowers at their own expense just felt it might be counterintuitive to trying to encourage the biodiversity and things, and everyone to do a little bit that will add up. So I was just wondering why that was reintroduced at quite so high, because I do think I've had a quick look and it is quite costly compared to other councils. And yeah, if that's something that we could maybe look at. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, you box the panel, if that's what we are. If I may, I'll take it offline in terms of just understanding, because I'm looking to Jana, Jana's looking to me in terms of where the source of the decision on any uplift in the cultivation licence fee is. And without sounding underwhelming, I need to look into that because it's not something that's ringing a bell inside our department. So I just need to understand. Yes, I'll talk to you after this meeting, but I suppose the point is I am aware corporately as the authority every year, whether it's our department in terms of environment and transport or any of the departments, we're duty bound because of the links back to the medium term financial strategy to look at the annual uplifts in all fees and charges, which we'll have already done for the next financial year. That's just that I'm not familiar whether that one sits within corporate resources or where, but what we would want to understand is if the logic is sound. Is it actually something that looks disproportionate? Though we do benchmarking, and I can give a waste example. We have to look at what sort of uplift we do to our fees, absolutely to cover cost, but we're stuck between a sandwich of not being seen to be making a substantial profit. So there is a real margin on some of that. It does look like it's a highways one, but I'm gonna suggest it's Pat. Through you, Chair, I'm gonna chat to you after the meeting and I will have a look at it. Thank you.
Just when you need it, Anne goes on holiday. We have one more from Ms Pendlebury.
It's, I think, a question probably for James. You're talking about the invasive species plan. And given that we are warming up and things are moving north, I know from my own experience we've got the Asian hornet coming towards us ever closer. What plans have we got in place to counteract the invasive species? I know that's a very broad question.
Thank you, Chair. So colleagues in forestry, etc., are aware of what's coming, and they're, I suppose, leaning towards national guidance and so on to help them develop local plans. We also have the ash dieback plan we have already, which we've been working on for nearly 10 years, I think now. So I don't know the detail, but I'm aware that relevant colleagues are keeping an eye on what's coming and trying to prepare where they can. And as I say, accessing national and expert advice where that's appropriate. But any more detail than that, I don't have it. Sure.
So we're all going to need some bug spray and bed netting. Mr Cook.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's to echo Dr. Hill's concerns about pathways and developments. Most recently at Councilsort on Foston Road, there was a large amount of hedgerow ripped out, 100-year-old hedgerow for an housing development. I personally naively seen it as just being able so people drive by, they can see the houses, and the plans were put in to replant edging. It caused a lot of fuss. Recently in Ratby, there's been 45 40-foot trees dragged out from the roadside as well. Again, maybe naively, I think this way so that people can see the housing and what's for sale. I just find that ludicrous, and I want to understand as a councillor our responsibility. I know this is the planning thing, and I know there's a lot of complications here, but at what point do we say ripping edges out in trees, and what power do we have to actually say this just isn't good enough just to build houses?
This is one that me, Jana, and any number of us could acknowledge the point. Absolutely. I think it's the complexity, as I think councillors are aware, is there's different planning functions relative to the district councils and the county council. So planning decisions aren't necessarily taken by the county council in relation to development. But my understanding of developments that come forward is they have to acknowledge where they're creating a deficit environmentally, and they have to, in effect, repair, make good on that deficit and add a further 10%. So under biodiversity net gain, in the cases of individual developments, what I don't know specifically is that those examples given where the decision was taken by the council, there will be conditions within that. But I accept that from a member of the public's perspective, it looks very visual at the point that hedgerows, trees are being removed, and unless or until that deficit is repaired, and then the additionality is put under biodiversity net gain. So but it is complex because those decisions aren't taken by the county council, and we can only comment as a consultee under various statutory elements, and that might not cover it in that example.
Yeah, I appreciate the answer, and I knew that was going to be the answer, but it's only right as a concerned person as well as a councillor they ask this question because it's just crazy. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Tilbury.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just going on from Graham's question, who monitors the biodiversity net gain? So, for instance, there's a development near me, Bellway, that they must have, for their biodiversity net gain, they had to like plant like hedgerow, like bushes outside the houses. But all those are now dead, like a year on. So, who monitors that that biodiversity net gain and what they're actually planting to replace what they're cutting down?
Through you, Chair, I'm gonna look at James because you've had a lot of conversations with our county council planners, but I'm assuming they also in turn have discussions with the district planners who potentially in the previous councillor's example, are making the decisions for any planning conditions, but we've tried to capture in this report a summation of any cumulative biodiversity net gain contributing planning permissions into that suite of a point in time assessment. But James, is there anything you would add?
Yes, and so as part of the planning conditions, they would have a biodiversity net gain plan, which would be signed off, and they would have conditions and clauses on it. And it would set out what the baseline BNG value was of the site, and then what the additional 10% is required. When the development is complete, again, as I understand it, then a site visit will be undertaken to check that that figure has been reached or not. And there will, as I say, under the various conditions and clauses, then there will be other action or taken or not taken, depending on whether the threshold has been met. The BNG is meant to then to be part of a 30-year covenant. And again, as I understand it, working with the planning authority, our ecology and bird biodiversity team would undertake periodic site visits to that site to check if the site has been maintained correctly and that the biodiversity value that was required was being maintained and so on. But again, I think for detail on that, you'd need to talk to planning colleagues, but that's a general overview of the process as I understand it.
Thank you, James. Dr. Hill.
I can add a bit more information. I'm a chair of a charity that's looking at actively having a site to have BNG put on it. And one of the things we have to do is sign up with another company for a 30-year deal, and they will monitor and report for us to show that we've achieved what we said we were going to achieve in terms of units. So that's how it's going to work on a sort of, in inverted commas, commercial basis. There will be an independent body who checks and reports saying, yes, you've done, no, you haven't. So when they buy the units, they're assured that it's going to happen. So that's how it should be happening if they're buying it off site, because that's what our site will do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mrs. Gray. Was great.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, going back to some of the points that were raised earlier in the discussion, I think the thing that I felt reading through this, there's some really, really good stuff coming out from national government, and there's also tensions around what the push for planning actually means. And I suppose what I want and what the Nature Restoration Fund will actually mean. Will it allow strategic and ambitious, projects that could really deliver for nature, or actually will it lead to things being watered down? And I suppose what I wanted to say, first of all, was a bit of a plea and a request that we do whatever we can through the mechanisms that we have, and also through elected representatives at a national level, because development and nature, in my view, they can't be, it can't be a binary, very clearly, and we can see that coming, hot after the flooding report that we've had. It's just so imperative that those two things are viewed together and not as almost in this awful conflict that some voices reported in the media have seemed to suggest recently. And the second thing, a bit more local, I'm really interested in the regenerative farming project over at Broombriggs. And I know there are some education boards, but I was wondering if there's an opportunity there for work perhaps with local schools, or maybe that's already underway, at what regenerative farming is and what it means, and, a little bit of a sort of broader, because I think this is really fascinating and really important work. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody like to comment on that?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Yeah, just on the regenerative farming, again, as part of the local nature recovery strategy, regenerative farming is one of the key delivery vehicles, and we'll be working with Bootsby College and the NFU, etc. on that. We have been talking about in the last couple of weeks about developing some kind of regenerative farming information sources, maybe even sessions for farmers, because we need to get them on board as well. But there's an interesting point about it, a wider audience to that as well. So that's something for me to think about. As to Broombriggs, yeah, I think it's still early doors in terms of where they're going with that, but we'll need to talk to Country Parks about whether there's scope to give access to that to school kids or whatever else for tours and a bit of information. Okay.
Thank you, James. Okay, I think we've exhausted that one as well. Oh, one more from Mr. Bloxham.
Yeah, just following up that point. The stuff we're doing on sustainable farming, is it all around education and carrots rather than sticks. I mean, farmers are struggling quite a lot at the moment, so I wouldn't want us to be pushing them to do things they don't want to do. Especially as we're a big landlord for farmers, I hope we're not forcing our guys to do anything, that they don't want to do. And then there was just another point. It follows on some of the stuff about invasive species. There's a bit in there. It mentions Himalayan balsam, which I know we have problems with in our rivers for flooding and things. And it says beavers eat it, but then it says we don't have any beavers. Are we introducing beavers? Have we got any? Have we reached out to conservation groups to get some beavers for Leicestershire? It'd be lovely if we did. It just, maybe we should do that. Thanks.
Chair, I'm going to let James answer this because I have a lot of history of getting involved in conversations about invasive species and creating a whole interesting conversation about American mink. So at this point, I am not 100% sure where we are with our colleagues in the various partners that we work with and beavers. I'm out.
Okay, James.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so I'm aware there are conversations going on about the possible introduction of beavers, but it's not just, you can't just release them, you have to have them fenced off and so on. I know the Wildlife Trust are thinking about it. I'm aware of one or two private landowners who are also thinking about it, but it is a licensed thing. You can't just rock up and...
Is it something we can encourage it?
We can support it through the local nature recovery strategy, potentially, yes. Yes, that's one way, because using beavers as natural landscapers to help with going back to flooding. They are very good at natural flood management, etc. So yeah, we didn't specify beavers in the local nature recovery strategy because there's no kind of active work in that place, but I've since found out there are conversations, so be part of the local nature recovery strategy. And on your first question around sustainable farming, I think as a council we don't have a position regarding sustainable farming per se, but I think the general trend is that members of the farming community and nationally they're realizing that more sustainable farming could be better for the future in terms of climate change and reducing the cost of fertilizer inputs and all that kind of stuff, and changing the economics around farming. But it may not be the solution that works for every farmer, so it will have to be on a case-by-case basis. And also the move to sustainable farming will be very much linked to where national government's going with environmental land management schemes and farming subsidies and so on as well. So it's part of a bigger picture. Not forcing people to do, no.
Microphone, James, John. Okay, thanks, James. Mr. Tilbury, anything to add?
Beavers, Chairman. Yeah, so I'd be really interested in introducing beavers. I was watching a really good documentary on beavers, and it all started, they had this 100 million flood alleviation scheme in Canada that essentially failed. They kept flooding, the land was flooded year after year and it failed. A set of beavers moved in and it cured the problem within 6 months. And not only did it cure the problem, the biodiversity, the whole area was transformed. The grass and the wetlands became more absorbent of water by like ridiculous amounts. All plant species that had since died out had come back, and it was all due to the beavers. And I think we should, I know it's almost like a funny subject, but I mean, it is really, I think, something we should look into bringing, especially as they do eat Himalayan balsam. And I think, especially if you look at Melton now, near the bridge, it's all covered in Himalayan balsam. You can barely even see the river. And I think that'd be something that I think covered into a local nature recovery strategy we should look into seriously. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Adam. Okay, are we all done with the questions? Okay, we'll move on then. I'd like to recommend this report as an update for us to note, and the committee's comments will be recorded in the minutes. Okay, on to item number 10 of the agenda. This is the Environment, Flooding and Climate Change Performance Report to December 2025. Joe and Nicola, I believe, are going to deliver this.
Thank you, Chair. And my ego, you don't need to give me marks out of 10 because I think Anne normally does this report, so I'm just going to rattle through and do my best. But Nicola is here as the author of the report if there are any specifics on it. So, as you said, Chair, so the report provides the latest 6 months performance update for the committee for the period up to December of last year, and it covers the key relevant environment, flooding and climate change PIs, and it covers indicators, I think, with varying ranges of influence and control, but the ambition is obviously to try and enrich oversight on environmental issues. So some we might not directly control, but they give a sort of barometer of what's happening across the county. In taking you through the report, I'd suggest having a look at the new performance summary chart at Appendix A. So that's new for this report, but we also have the more detailed performance dashboard, and that's at Appendix B, which you're used to seeing. As this is not the first performance report that this committee has now considered, I wasn't going to propose to go through how the dashboard should be interpreted, but I think colleagues are aware you have those direction of arrow symbols, you also have RAG ratings, and you have comparative quartile positions. So where we're compared against 31 other comparator councils. But they're all explained in the background section of the report, as is the acknowledgement that the frequency with which some of these indicators are updated varies depending on when we're supplied with the data or we can generate it ourselves. So if I just summarise, we've got 1 indicator in the top quartile, 3 in the second, 4 in the third, and 1 in the fourth quartile since the last performance update. And since then, we've had 9 that have showed improvement, 1 has declined, and 10 have stayed the same. Also, of the indicators where we assign a target to them, of which there are 10, we've got 6 KPIs that are green, so they're meeting their target, 3 amber, and 1 red. And as I say, all of those are sort of expanded upon in that Appendix B dashboard. So I'm just going to concentrate on where there's been a change. So if I just touch on the things that are different. So if I start with electric vehicle infrastructure and ownership, public EV charging locations per 100,000 of the population increased by 16% on the same period last year, but remains in the third quartile. The council received some government funding to install EV charge points, and it is piloting a few EV vans within the fleet, and we'll get some results of that. And in the report, there's some information on some of that funding. So the Levi funding to put these public on-street charge points in, there's some expansion on that in the report. We then also have ULEV, the ultra-low emission vehicle ownership, that rose by 41% compared to the previous year, and it places Leicestershire in the second quartile for 2024. Again, the council monitors energy efficiency of homes. So I think we've reported this before, but 99% of new homes have an EPC or an energy performance certificate rating of C or above, while 50% of existing homes meet this standard. Both indicators show above average performance, so they're in the first and second quartile respectively compared to other councils. And whilst they're not indicators that we have direct control of, the council does support energy efficiency through local initiatives like the Warm Homes Service and the Green Living Leicestershire Partnership. If I move on to air quality measures, they improved slightly. So we measure something called PM 2.5 levels, and they decreased from 7.7 to 7.1. Remaining below the UK target, but above the World Health Organisation's recommendations. So despite improvement, that's the one where Leicestershire is still in the fourth quartile compared to its peers. But the council, via public health colleagues, does lead a partnership that looks to work and address air quality and health. And that's with the district councils and wider health bodies. And that was set up back in 2020, but this committee does periodically get updates from public health colleagues. And I think there is one potentially scheduled for later this year where they'll give a more detailed report on some of that air quality information. On biodiversity and river quality, topical, linked to some of the earlier conversation about discharges, only 1% of Leicestershire's rivers are in good ecological status, with no rivers in good chemical status as of 2022 when we had information, and that reflects no change since 2019. The Environment Agency continues monitoring. It's their role to do that, and the next assessment, as we understand it, is expected at the end of this calendar year, so at the end of 2026. Tree planting initiatives, some really positive progress here. Whilst Leicestershire has about 6% of woodland cover, so that's really below the national average, the council has really worked hard on and last month announced enhancements to the original Tree for Every Resident, and now we're looking to plant 1 million trees by 2032. And in terms of performance, we've absolutely well and truly surpassed the 25-26 target, and now we're at almost 500,000 trees planted since 2021. working with partners like the National Forest Company and the Woodland Trust. So some really strong performance there. And if I just then finish on risks and air pollution, the council is currently managing 2 environmental risks related to one is related to biodiversity and mowing regimes, and the other is dog waste leaching from a specific container, I think at one of the country parks from memory. But just for members of the committee, since the report was written, that latter risk has been managed. So actually we're down to 1, but at the time of writing the report, that was correct. There were 2. And then nitrogen dioxide, NO2 exceedances fell to 0 in 2024, which is an improvement from the previous year when we just had 1. And with that, Chair, they're the major changes, but again, happy to take any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. Craig.
Very quick one, Chair. Just with regards to the air pollution, the PM 2.5, if memory serves, there's 2 different ones we monitor. Is it 10 and 2.5? And 2.5 is not the more dangerous one, but it is the more visible one. Am I right there?
Sorry, Chair, I'm just checking with Nicholas. Still do both. Nicola, is that right?
Yeah, so 2.5 is actually the more dangerous one, because that's the one that can sort of go through different membranes in your body to cause havoc, particularly with toxins.
So on that then, are we seeing those centred around our many quarries within Leicestershire?
As I understand it, quarries do contribute to it, but fuel combustion is a major element of it as well. And so the road networks is an issue in terms of air quality. So when we map all of this, we see that the western side of Leicestershire has higher densities of PM 2.5 as background data. And that's where you find all the industry, the airports, the infrastructure, etc.
Thank you, Nicola. Adam had something to add here.
Yeah, just a response to you, Craig. I was at Tarmac, I think last Friday in Mount Sorrel, and they've got sensors all around the quarry because that was asked by one of the people there. So if it's getting to dangerous levels, but it apparently it's never done that. So just thought I'd let you know that. Cheers.
Thank you, Adam. Ms. Gray.
Yeah, thank you. I was actually going to have a question about air quality, but I'm grateful to Joe for highlighting that we're going to get a little bit more information, because I think there's quite a lot of work and awareness around public health that could go on there, because domestic burning is actually quite a large source, isn't it? Wood burning stoves, for example, is another. So yeah, I'm going to hold fire on what I was going to say until we get that more detailed report later, but I'm glad that that's coming. I wanted to ask about the Levi funding and the on-street charge points. I know that I think there are 45 locations, is that right, across the county that have been in receipt of that funding and been identified as locations. I would like some information on the locations in Loughborough, if that's possible. That would be really, really helpful. And I did have another one and it's just escaped my brain. So I'm sorry, we'll leave it there. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, if I just come back, Jana and I were just checking, but I think when we last did agenda planning, the public health report is scheduled for June. So it's the next meeting that we'll have. So it'll be quite topical. Thanks.
Thank you. That's great.
Thank you. Dr. Hill has a question.
Thank you, Chair. I seem to remember the PM 2.5 thing basically follows the track of the M1. So make of that what you will. I've just observation really, Chair, from paragraph 15, 99% of new homes are relatively energy efficient. I think that's quite nicely worded, because C+, it's stunningly average. I've thought for years we could solve a lot of stuff in terms of energy efficiency by upping the building reg standards a lot. Governments have chosen not to, and I think it's a shame, because there's a massive job to retrofit, but we're still building houses that somebody 50, 60, 70 years ago would look at and go, well, that hasn't changed much. Where's all your technology gone, lads? And I think it's a real disappointment. And it's a national issue. It's nothing we can do. It's just an observation, Chair.
Thank you for that. Mrs. Gray, it's come back to you.
Sorry, it has, Chair. Sorry, that's always the way, isn't it? I wanted to ask about sewage in the rivers, because we've got obviously an update here on the status in terms of chemicals, but I just wondered whether we get updates about the sewage pollution of our waterways.
Well, Nick, I don't know if we do capture sewage discharge occurrences.
No, we don't capture that at the moment, but as part of like the main data that comes through, if we look at it in detail, you can see what's part of it. So you can see the different types of chemicals, etc., and also I think natural pollutants as well. So I could have a look into it and see what else we can dig out for you if you like.
That would be quite interesting. Thank you.
Anything to add, Adam? Okay. I just did have a sort of a general comment. These gases that we're talking about, given that 99% of the air is comprised of oxygen and nitrogen mix, of which 77% approximately is nitrogen, 22% oxygen. These chemicals we're talking about in the air are in fact trace elements. We're all happy with that? Or has anybody got anything to say about that? They all exist in the last 1% of elements in the air. Okay, just a comment. We'll continue then. If we're all done with questions, I'll recommend this report is a 6-monthly update for us to note. The committee's comments will be recorded in the minutes. Which brings us on to the next item, item 11, date of next meeting, which is scheduled to take place on Thursday, the 8th of June, 2026 at 2 p.m. Item 12, there being no other items, I'd like to thank you all and declare the meeting closed.